Hey guys, so today I am going to be talking about the importance of feeding quality colostrum to calves, and I chose this topic to talk about because I work on the UGA dairy and I think calf health is really important to their future success in the herd, and I find all of it really interesting, and I'm doing some research right now on colostrum, so I really wanted to talk about it for this project. So what is considered colostrum? So colostrum is the first few milks after a baby is born, after the mother is given birth, and it is really high in antibodies, protein, fat, and vitamins. But for this discussion specifically, we're going to be focusing on the antibodies in the colostrum, which are called the immunoglobulins. When is colostrum fed? So colostrum is fed as soon as we can find the baby on the ground. We try to get colostrum in it, and this is because early ingestion of the colostrum is essential to helping her begin her track to being successful later in life. And the calf can only absorb the antibodies in the colostrum for up to 24 hours after it's born before it starts to develop an immune system of its own. So this is a video I took on the farm, and we found these twins born, and in the video you can see that one of them is already suckling the mother, which we actually don't want to happen because they will not drink as much if they are on their own drinking colostrum from the mom. So we want to find them as quickly as possible and separate them from their mom so we can give them a higher amount of colostrum. So I wanted to share some of the things that influence the colostrum's quality, and some of these things include the health of the dam. So when her calf is born, we want the calf to be getting as many antibodies as we can from the mother's colostrum, and to get immunoglobulins in this colostrum, the more exposure the dam has had to pathogens, the higher immunoglobulin level she's going to have, because she's going to have experienced these pathogens before and her immune system will have overcome them, so she will be able to pass these on to her calf. And we want to make sure that she is vaccinated, because when she is vaccinated, she is going to be producing specific immunoglobulins, and we give vaccinations when they're in their dry period for this. We also want to make sure that we are preserving the colostrum correctly and at the correct temperatures, because if they're stored incorrectly, they can have bacterial contamination, and this will lower the quality of the colostrum. And if we have bacterial contamination, it also has a negative impact on the absorption of the immunoglobulin IgG on the calf's part, because it has an interaction in the small intestine that decreases the absorption. And bacterial contamination can also cause diseases, like the mother can pass on a disease through contamination to her calf from the colostrum, which we want to avoid at all costs. And another big factor that influences her colostrum's quality is parity. So the more calves she has, the higher the quality of her colostrum tends to be. Now this can be variant dependent on the cow, but it tends to be higher with each calving. So there's a few ways to test for the colostrum quality, and one of them is a hydrometer, and it's this little tool up in the right corner where it is a cylinder and it is placed in a container that holds colostrum, and it floats freely up and down, and we want to use this at room temperature. We want the colostrum to be at room temperature when we test it, but this isn't always possible since we're usually heating colostrum up to be fed. So we have this chart in the bottom right corner that is able to convert what it is measured at to what the corrected value would be, dependent on the temperature of the colostrum. So this little tool uses specific gravity and uses a color-coded scale to show the quality of the colostrum, and You can see in the picture the green is where this colostrum is at, which is higher than 50 milligrams per milliliter of immunoglobulins, which is ideal for the calf. And the yellow is 20 to 50 milligrams per milliliter of immunoglobulins, and the red is less than 20 milligrams per milliliter of immunoglobulins. Another tool we can use to test for quality is a Brix refractometer, and this is actually what we use on the farm to test because it's really quick, really easy to just pull out. And it's originally designed to measure sucrose, but we can actually use it for the immunoglobulins within colostrum. And the numbers on this little tool are different than the numbers that the hydrometer provides, but the Brix value of 22% is equivalent to the green area on the hydrometer, which is 50 milligrams per milliliter. So we want to get either 22% Brix reading, or we want to get 50 milligrams per milliliter with the hydrometer to know that we have high quality colostrum. And to use the Brix, we drop some colostrum on this little prism face right here and lower the cover on top of it and push the go button to read the colostrum value. So another thing I wanted to talk about was passive transfer of immunity, and why this kind of ties in together why the quality of colostrum is important. So when calves are born, their dams actually are not able to pass down immunoglobulins to them through the uterus because their placentas do not allow for the transfer of large particles across them. So the immunoglobulins are too big to be passed down in utero. So this means that calves are born with little to no antibodies, and their immune systems are functional, but they don't have any help from their mothers. So we need passive transfer of immunity through the colostrum, so we need them to be consuming immunoglobulins through their colostrum. And these antibodies are absorbed across their small intestine, which provide temporary immunity. It's not permanent for the rest of their life, because they will eventually develop their own immune systems, and they'll be able to fight off certain diseases and gain up their immune resistance. And their self-produced immunoglobulins reach high levels 16 to 32 days after birth. So we really need what they get from colostrum to be good enough to last them to this point. So how do you know if a calf passes for passive transfer? So we have a test to see if they pass or fail, and this estimates the total blood serum protein in the calf, and we have to wait until the calf is at least 1 day old to draw blood. And we can actually use the Brix refractometer tool from a few slides back for this. And if it's higher than 6, that means they have a large volume of antibodies and they're well protected against pathogens. And 5.5 to 6, it means they're still pretty well protected, but if there's a heavy pathogen exposure, they could be at risk. 5 to 5.4, they're moderately protected. 4.5 to 4.9, minimally protected, and if it's less than 4.5, they're really at high risk for developing a pathogen. And what happens if a calf fails passive transfer? So I actually took this picture of a sick calf on the farm and thought it would be good to add into this slide. So if a calf fails passive transfer, that means she doesn't have enough immunoglobulins from the colostrum that she was fed, or she wasn't fed enough colostrum. It could mean a whole number of things. But these calves are going to be given a higher amount of antimicrobial treatments, as a study found that there were 38 treatments given for 37 failed calves versus 19 treatments for 60 passing calves. And in the same study, there was a higher incidence of infectious diseases in the failed calves. So 56.8% of failed calves had infectious diseases, and only 16.7% of the passing calves had the same diseases. And there's also a higher incidence of death with the failed calves. So 16.2% of failed calves died, and only 1.7% of passing calves did. So you can clearly see the importance of passing passive transfer and having those immunoglobulins in their systems. So I wanted to wrap up by giving a few ways that farms could ensure that their calves pass passive transfer, because we want to make them have the most successful lives they can, and we don't want to have any losses on the farm. So failing passive transfer averages out to a cost of $65 per calf, and this can get really costly with certain producers. If they have a small farm, And this cost is coming from mortality, morbidity, and a decrease in the average daily gain of the calves. So to ensure that these calves are getting everything they need, we want to provide colostrum often. So we want to give colostrum 3 times a day for a minimum of at least 6 liters a day consumed during their first 48 hours of life. We want to pump them full of these immunoglobulins and set their immune systems up for the first few weeks of their lives until they start to develop their own antibodies. And we want to ensure there's no bacterial contamination, like within the milking equipment or within the containers the colostrum is stored or fed in. And we want to make sure there's proper storage techniques of the colostrum, so it can only be frozen for up to 6 months or refrigerated for up to 2 to 3 days. And past that, we want to toss it so it doesn't have any bacterial contamination. And more ways that they can ensure that they are passing passive transfer is we want to avoid cold stress, because if calves are cold, they can have a negative impact on their absorption function of their small intestine, which is where the antibodies are absorbed. And there actually was no correlation between heat stress and a negative impact on small intestine absorption, which I thought was interesting. We want to stay up to date on the dams vaccines, so they're passing on the immunoglobulins they develop from these vaccines, and we want to keep a proper dry period, because this means that the dam is going to be producing high quality colostrum, and we want to make sure that she's kept up to date on her vaccines throughout the dry period as well. We want to make sure that our calves are happy and healthy like this little girl, and we want to give them the best lives possible. Thank you.